Let me introduce our guest this morning. Nilanjan Banik is a senior economist joining us on the broadcast, and Mitali Nikore is founder Nikore Associates. Thank you very much, Nilanjan and Mitali, for joining us on the broadcast. Nilanjan, I want to start with you. Fact is, when the budget is presented, and Nirmala Sitharaman in about 40 minutes from now, will be standing up in Parliament and making her budget speech. She has a record of the longest budget speech, but this is an interim budget, so let's see if she crosses that 2-hour, 45-minute mark. We'll just have to wait and watch. But here's the thing. For the Aam Aadmi, for the Aam citizen, the budget is a complicated piece of paper, right? There are a lot of big words thrown around. There's a lot of jargon thrown around. But what I find this government do particularly well is communicate. So the budget is complicated. During the budget speech, there'll be big words and jargons used, and most of us will be scratching our heads. But post the budget, the government has found a very unique and novel way of communicating what the budget has for you, what the budget has for the Garib, what the budget has for the Aam Aadmi. So you'll have Nirmala Sitharaman do the traditional interview with Doordarshan, and then you'll have the Prime Minister come in, speak in Hindi to explain to people what the budget has for you. Now, for example, my reporters are telling me that the government has already communicated to them that the budget this year is a Gyan budget. It is for the Garib, it's for the youth, it is for the Annadata, and it is for the Nari of this country. Do you think that will be the focus area? I mean, we are still 60 minutes away from the speech, but this is an interim budget. Do you think that will be the focus area? Focus areas where you can catch votes and you can increase some social spending as well.
I think, Shreya, you're absolutely correct, because if you see what's happening with respect to the Indian economy is only one of the fastest growing large economy in the world, and we are growing in excess of 7.3% of GDP every year over the last 3 years. So this is a great stuff. Also, in terms of, let's say, direct and indirect tax collection, I think we have now got a record amount of both corporate tax and direct tax, as well as GST tax collection. Now, when you have so much of tax collection, what it tells you in a very simple terms, that the Indian economy is doing well, because 2/3 of our domestic economy are actually driven by factors such as tourism, such as healthcare, such as education, which has nothing to do with what is happening elsewhere in the world. So in that way, Indian economy is resilient and we are growing. So that's the good stuff I'm talking about. Also, if you see the PLFS data, which is Periodic Labor Force Survey data, which is also indicating that the number of working age population has increased. What it tells you, again, in a very simple terms, every year we have close to 12 million people coming to the job market, and most of them are actually getting jobs. Of course, there is a debate about the quality of job, about the wage rate, about the female labor force participation, and these are the bug areas that you just now mentioned, and which the government, I think, is going to resonate with the common man, because this is an election year. And therefore, what I presume is a little bit more spending on the capital expenditure, for instance, in terms of building roads, ports, and other infrastructure, which does not require that much high-skilled labor. So in that way, I think government can achieve the dual objective of both job creation as well as trying to make the corporate sector happy by reducing the cost of doing business. So that is point number one. The second point that I want to harp about is if you look into the income distribution. Now, there are studies by Oxfam or, for that matter, World Inequality Report, which tend to suggest that although we are doing well in terms of growth of our GDP, but when it comes to per capita income, India still ranked 143rd out of 195 countries. Also, because we rank so lowly in terms of per capita income, there is an apprehension that maybe that is leading to a more skewed income distribution, with the rich sharing a larger section of the economic pie that we are seeing happening. Now, my sense is government is also cognizant about this fact, and therefore we are also going to see maybe more allocation towards the agricultural sector, towards the MSME sector. Mind you, as we speak, around 40% of our population still depend on the agricultural sector. So what are the areas within agricultural sector which I think government is going to, or rather should put money in terms of expectation? This year, somehow the agricultural output did not do that well because we are slowly entering the stage of climate change. We have this El Nino effect, which actually affected our agricultural output. And therefore, I see a larger allocation towards building, let's say, more cold storage unit, building more, let's say, food processing unit, or for that matter, building more agricultural related irrigation facilities, which is going to actually help the farmers to ameliorate the volatility that we see in the agricultural sector. Also, what is more important from the perspective of renewable energy, I think that time has come for India and for the policymakers in India to give more incentive to the climate resistant crop, growing climate resistant crop like jowar, bajra, stuff like that. Because if you're thinking in terms of rice, wheat, sugarcane, these are the crop which actually take lots of water, so therefore, the time has come that within the agricultural sector, we put emphasis growing climate-resistant crop, as well as give incentive to grow more food processing unit and cold storage unit. And the last point I want to mention is also another large section of the population also depend upon the micro and small medium enterprises. Now, interestingly, if you find that this bottom 30 percentile of our population, they actually earn their livelihood not only from the agricultural sector, but another part is also dependent upon the MSME sector. And these are the people with high marginal propensity to consume, meaning that they actually are the one who spend on domestic goods and services, domestically produced goods and services. So in terms of keeping the momentum that we are seeing in terms of the growth process that is happening now, I think from the perspective of Aam Aadmi, from the perspective of common man, it is very important that the finance minister allocate fund towards the agricultural sector and the MSME sector.
Okay, agricultural sector, perhaps the outlay will increase. We don't know, but that's what it looks like. Mitali Nikore, just come in here. What we are seeing are pictures that are coming to us from the president's house. This is when, so traditionally this is what happens, right? That once you leave North Block, you have had the traditional photo op, you go to the president, you have a cup of tea with her, and then head straight to Parliament, where in Parliament right now, Nirmala Sitharaman is meeting with her cabinet colleagues. So that's part of the process. 10 o'clock is when the real film begins, as it were. It's been raining, Mitali, just by the way, in Delhi. And finance ministry officials are telling us this is a good sign. This is a sign that gods are smiling on us and are smiling on the Indian economy. And the Indian citizen will be smiling post the budget announcement and presentation. We do not know. I want to speak about the tax-paying citizen with you, Mitali. I mean, we don't like paying taxes. I don't like paying taxes. I don't want to give 30% of my salary to the government. We understand this is their earning. We understand this is how governments fund infrastructure projects, fund services, fund social sector schemes, etc. We understand that, but 30%, that really pinches. Now, one of the hopes is that the government is kind to the Indian middle-class citizen who pays taxes and says, chalo, 30% bahut hai, let's bring it down to 25%. Do you see that happening? People say interim budget hai, will not happen. But I again keep going back to 2019 and saying a lot can happen even during an interim budget. Mitali, you're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry for that. We're still in, we're in 2024, and yet we have to have an appearance where someone has to unmute themselves. So, good morning. And I was saying, I love your sari. Despite the rain and the fog, you're bringing like a bright ray of sunshine to all of us. I was actually shooting at Vijay Chowk yesterday in the rain, so I'm aware. Just coming back to our expectations on the tax regime and the tax slabs, definitely, Shreya, I'm going to be in the majority of people who say that this time I really don't expect any changes in the tax regime and the tax slabs, simply because we had that announcement, last year, of this new tax regime which has come out, and this simplified in a way tax regime which has come out. And in fact, I was speaking with a colleague and found out that a lot of new hirees and Gen Z, as we call them, are opting for the new tax regime, which is the option given to them. So I don't expect this year that to happen. However, one major area on taxation that we need to work on as a country is expanding the base of our taxation, right? Because what is happening today is that the citizens who are paying taxes are paying, regular taxes, but that is a very small proportion, around 10% of the population. We need to figure out ways through direct as well as indirect taxation so that a wider set of citizens is able to pay taxes and is actually paying the taxes. And to do this, of course, GST is one mechanism, but going beyond the GST, looking at our income taxation, looking at groups that need to be taxed, looking at the tax compliance as well is very, very important. And that's the way in which we can actually bring down taxes on the people who are currently paying in the long term. It's probably not going to happen in the short term today, but this is a long-term path that we need to study. How can we widen the tax base?
That's true. Why should the burden fall only on a few? As we look at these pictures, I wonder whether our viewers noticed the dahi chini custom tradition that was at play at Rashtrapati Bhavan. So there's the president giving a spoonful of yogurt and sugar to the finance minister. There are some things which simply don't go out of fashion. It's just so lovely to see these traditions play out, whether it's the making of the halwa in North Block or whether there is this dahi chini tradition. Essentially to say when kids in India go for an exam, you'll usually give them yogurt and sugar. It's supposed to be auspicious. So we hope things work out well for Nirmala Sitharaman, who is presenting her 6th budget. This is her interim budget. This is her 2nd interim budget, but this is her 6th budget. And when she does that, she will equal the record of Morarji Desai, former Prime Minister Morarji Desai, who presented 5 budgets and 1 interim budget. And next year, if she continues to be finance minister, she's on track to beat Morarji Desai's record as well. As we speak, I'm just, there's a piece of information just coming in. Again, this is all part of process, ladies and gentlemen, but the cabinet has to approve the budget. So what happens is that the finance minister goes to the parliament. That's where she's meeting the cabinet. The cabinet has met and the cabinet has now approved the budget, which means that the budget is ready for presentation to the people of India. That will happen at 11 o'clock. Mitali, yesterday, Draupadi Murmu, the president of India, in her address said, look, inflation in our country, inflation is something that directly impacts citizens of this country, right? It's as close as it gets for any one of us. She said, look, inflation at one point in India used to be 11%. Now it is only 4%. Figures are great. Statistics are great. They look good on paper. But we know we are paying more for everything, much, much more than we should be paying. Will inflation at all be priority for government, or will they say this is not the time for it? People are paying what they are for, essential items, for oil, for rice, for wheat, for etc., etc. Let them pay what they are right now, and we'll see what to do about it later.
No, absolutely, Shreya. Inflation is really top of mind for any common consumer, and particularly for women, because women are the ones who are managing household budgets. Women are the ones who are really looking at the monthly outgo on groceries, on food, on fuel, and increasingly, if you look at the National Family and Health Survey data, women are taking around 98% of household decisions either independently or in consultation with their with their spouses. So today, inflation is an issue that impacts women directly. And I would say that, if we look at the history of inflation management, when the RBI set up a monetary policy committee to look directly at inflation and manage inflation in a range of 2 to 6%, that was a real turning point for monetary economics in our country. And we have reached a point now where the RBI proactively through this committee does a continuous inflation management. And that is why, a President Murmu can go and, make that speech, because on a daily basis, the Monetary Policy Committee is, making decisions in terms of our money supply, in terms of, different sources of managing monetary economics in order to keep the inflation balance. So I would say that in this budget, definitely the inflationary impact comes majorly from the fiscal deficit. If the fiscal deficit can be kept in a range of 6.5 to 7%, as was predicted last year, then our inflationary expectations can also be tamed. But if we feel that, we need to do a lot more social spending, or we need to do a lot more infrastructure push, because the real money gets spent on capital expenditure, which is infrastructure. So if that infrastructure push is very massive in this budget, then definitely it will impact our fiscal deficit. So, that's how all of these things link. But I just want to say one thing. If you look at that image of, the finance minister and the president together in that dahi chini photo that you showed, just the fact that today in our country, we have a female president feeding dahi chini to a female, finance minister who are leading from the front in terms of managing India's economy. It's a huge moment, and it's a huge moment for all of us, who have been fighting for gender equality all our life. So this Gyan budget, the Nari Shakti, which is going to be emphasized in this budget, I'm really hoping that it also translates into the gender budget increasing, because the gender budget has hovered between 5 to 6% of the total expenditure for the last 15 years. This is the year where we can really see a break and, go to that 10% mark. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Let's keep our fingers crossed, not just for that, but for much more. Nilanjan, I'm just going to pick the thread, thread to something that Mitali has said. She's spoken about infrastructure, and she's saying that, look, the fact is that when a government, the big spend for any government is infrastructure. Fact is, infrastructure and ramping up your infrastructure will be required if you want to become a $5 trillion economy. That is the stated aim of this government. Right now, however, do you see that happening? A big push for infrastructure, a big push, for social schemes, say an expansion of outlay for the Kishan Nidhi Yojana, or for the pension scheme for poor. Do you see that happening? Or do you see the government even taking in concerns of the middle class citizen? Because this, again, I say this to some extent it will be a political budget. After all, this is a government that is going to go to the people of India for its votes in the next 3 to 4 months. So thoda populist to hona padega. But question is, who will they prioritize? Will they prioritize infrastructure? Will they prioritize the Garib Kisan, or will they prioritize the Aam Aadmi? Tino ko karna will not be possible.
So Shreya, I beg to differ with the fact that if you're putting more money in terms of building infrastructure, it's going to create inflation. Because if you see the root cause of inflation, if you go to the market, it's the price of vegetables and oil, which are going through the roof. And there is a divergence between headline inflation numbers, which is around 7%, and the price of food and vegetables, which is near 9%. Now, on the contrary, if you're building roads, ports, and airports, it is going to bring down the cost of business. It is going to bring down the logistic cost. It is going to, in fact, bring down the inflation numbers. So we will have to be mindful, what is the root cause of inflation? Like I said in the beginning, that a reason for inflation in the food price category has to do with the agricultural sector volatility that we are seeing because of extreme climate condition. Also because of war in Russia and Ukraine, also in Middle East, we are seeing the crude price are not coming down. So those things are leading to the inflation, which is impacting the common Aam Aadmi. So not so much spending on infrastructure. On the contrary, spending on infrastructure is going to reduce the inflation because it is going to help our manufacturing competitiveness, be it in terms of shipping goods from a smaller town in rural hinterland of India to, let's say, the big port cities of Mumbai, Chennai, or for that matter, Delhi, So in that way, I think infrastructure spending should continue. Now, the other point you mentioned is about the fiscal deficit. Now, fiscal deficit is also related to inflation. For instance, if the government is spending money on non-merit subsidy, for instance, spending money on, let's say, kerosene, spending money on giving free electricity, spending money on, let's say, even giving lower cost LPG, a gas cylinder, So those are non-merit subsidy. Why we say? Because it is not reaching the intended group of population for which the subsidies are given. So that is going to elevate the fiscal deficit condition that we are seeing. But my sense is because this is an election year, government will be very much mindful that the inflation and the fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit, they're trying to contain it to 5.9%. You will see that very soon government will come out in the budget saying that they have achieved this fiscal deficit. In fact, you should know that government has now put 4 lakh crore with RBI. They're not spending just to ensure that the inflation or the fiscal deficit target is missed. So in that way, government is doing the right thing in terms of fighting inflation, as well as doing the right thing in terms of building more airports infrastructure, which is also going to create jobs. As I mentioned, that the multiplier effect of building additional road, port, airport is almost 2.5. What it means that if you're spending 100 rupees in terms of building physical infrastructure, in a way that is creating 250 rupees of additional income because you're creating employment opportunity, you're creating demand for steel, cement, and things like that. So going forward in this budget, I hope that the government is going to continue with the capital expenditure, which it was doing over the last 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Okay, and what any country needs is sustainable growth. You don't want to grow on borrowed money. That's something that no country wants to do. It's simply not sustainable. So the government will be careful about where it spends its money, but it will have to spend money. As I said, this is an election year. Mitali, quick bullet points, 3 big expectations. I've already seen the placard from Doordarshan telling us that their live broadcast will be starting soon, but 3 bullet points, top 3 expectations.
We expect an increase in the gender budget. Number 2, we expect an increase in the social sector schemes. And number 3, we expect an increase in the renewable energy budget. We haven't spoken about it today, but I definitely think more investment in solar, more investment in clean tech, and more investment in green energy.
But that seems to be a priority area for the government because the Prime Minister seems personally invested in it.
Absolutely. In fact, the International Solar Alliance, we have seen the presence of the Prime Minister. So he's leading that from the front. And also, if we look at the announcements that were made at COP28 and the commitments that India has done, it will be translating into the budget, even the interim budget, because that is a big priority area for the government. And social sector, I'm talking about education, I'm talking about health, I'm talking about, spending for the rural poor, investing in the, poor is very important at this stage.